of nation building in the diaspora and Africa? Would it not be disastrous for the Europeans to interfere and intervene and keep us at arm's length, Africa and its diaspora, not reading from the same page? The next generation will not forgive us for this. The Caribbean has written to all of the powers of Europe, the old imperial powers and those powers that persist and believe in that Africa is a place where if they cannot get the free labor, they can get cheap resources. And in order to get those cheap resources, they have to maintain a dominant influence over African policy. This is their strategy. But they believe that the objective is to keep the African world divided within itself, divided against itself. And to a large extent, there were moments when they succeeded. But there were also moments when they failed miserably. And this is why Africa is a free continent today. But the Caribbean governments have written to the European governments asking for a summit to discuss the reparatory justice approach of global Africa. The Europeans have had the comfort of knowing that they could resist this call for a formal summit because they know that Africa and the political leadership of Africa is not on board. It's because the Europeans believe that the influence they have over African political leadership is greater than the influence which the diaspora Africans have over Mother Africa. And so they can resist. But that resistance will come to a very, very swift end. The resistance of the European world to discuss this matter will come to a very swift end the moment Africa, the African Union, step up and say, we are supportive of this summit. We are supportive of this summit. Let us get together in much the same way that the Europeans came together in order to make the slave trade possible. In much the same way that the Europeans came together to take over Africa and its people and its resources, to divide the geography of Africa. In much the same way that at the Berlin Conference, the Europeans came together and carved up Africa and did with it what they wanted. We, the Africans, now have to come together in the first instance to have our own summit. It is the duty and the responsibility not only of the diaspora, but of the African leadership today. We have a sense of history, and we know that Africa, the African Union, will be rising to fulfill its destiny and its history, were it to host in Africa, in 2022, a global summit to bring all of the African organizations together to discuss reparatory justice. We know that this is something we want. Can we not imagine that if one of our countries in Africa, under the auspices of the African Union, hosts a conference, the Global Africa Summit on Reparations, there will be hundreds and thousands of Africans from all over the world coming home to Africa to talk about its future. There will be no greater moment in this first quarter of the 21st century than to see 200,000 Africans from its diaspora and across the continent pouring into Africa to talk about reparatory justice, to speak about development, to speak about global Africa, to speak about the future of all of us. This is what this moment in history is calling for. This is what the Caribbean is calling for. How proud I felt when the political leaders of the Caribbean, Prime Minister Motley of Barbados, Prime Minister Gonzalez of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Prime Minister Brown of Antigua and Barbuda, and the leadership. When our CARICOM leaders called for this summit with the African Union just to discuss the need for economic and cultural and political bonding. And when that conference took place just 2 months ago, it was the first time ever that the Caribbean diaspora at the level of government and the African governments came together to talk about their common interests. We have not recovered from the magnificence of that conference that was hosted by the political leadership of Kenya. It was so extraordinary. But that was just phase one. That was just the first moment. The next moment has to be the crescendo, when in 2022, the African Union hosts all of us in Africa to settle the matters of Durban in 2001 and to push forward into the future of global Africa. Today, in academia, we continue to talk about Pan-Africanism, and it's a framework that deserves respect. But the emergent framework arising from the Pan-African history is the concept of global Africa. Global Africa. There are African nations and African communities all over the world. In the United States, in Canada, in Brazil, in Colombia, Central America, the Caribbean, there are African states and African communities that are so very keen to sit and summit with African leadership to talk about global Africa. One of the hats I wear is a general editor of UNESCO's General History of Africa. We have had 8 magnificent volumes on the UNESCO History of Africa series. But now we are about to publish the 9th volume in that UNESCO-sponsored series. But what did we decide? We decided that while the first 8 volumes were called the General History of Africa, the 9th volume will be called the Global History of Africa. And I have the privilege and pleasure to be one of the editors of the Global History of Africa. The history of the Africans wherever they are. The history of the Africans wherever they were taken and wherever they have migrated and carried African culture and civilization, the triumph of African culture and the pain of African degradation. Wherever those experiences were identified, we have tracked them down and we have now emerged with an authentic global history of Africa. All of this was the work of the academics. Now it's time for all political leaders to think in those conceptual frameworks, global Africa, wherever we are. The prime ministers of African majority societies in the Caribbean, the prime ministers and presidents of African nations on the continent, equally speaking as leaders of nations. This is what we want. This is what the 21st century is calling for. Global Africa, the politics of it, the economics of it, the sociology of it, erupting out of the tradition of Pan-Africanism, a new phase in the evolution of Pan-Africanism. This 21st century rendition of Pan-Africanism, global Africa. Economics, politics, culture, integrated, functional, uplifting uplifting the African people wherever they are. And so this is the moment. This is the moment. The biggest challenge we have to overcome is the rampant propaganda that is spread all over Africa by European propagandists and some of the local supporters. And bear in mind, whenever there is a global crime, whenever there is a large international crime, there will always be a local partner. But that local partner makes the crime even more heinous and vulgar. The propaganda that has spread through Africa is that the political leadership of Africa in the era of the slave trade and colonization, that this was a partnership between African political leaders and European political leaders, between African economic interests and European economic interests, and therefore slavery and slave trade were joint ventures. This is propaganda. This is not true. And we have to reject that. And the truth is what we know. African people have always resisted the slave trade and slavery. They resisted it on the ground in Africa. The historical evidence shows that Africans were fighting back from the moment the Europeans arrived with their ships and their guns and their cannons and their military and their armies to capture our people and take them out of Africa and spread them across the world as free labor. There was African resistance to that. But we all know that wherever there is resistance, there will always be a few people who would be part of that traitorous minority. We always know that. It continues today. There were always one or two leaders in various parts of Africa that joined in collaboration. But there were a minority. The majority of African governments and leaders and kings and tribal chiefs and the communities rose up against the slave trade and slavery. Even on their way to the New World, we know, for example, that 25% of all of the slave ships experienced revolts across the Atlantic. They fought on the ships across the Atlantic. And when they arrive in the Americas, they continue that struggle. The history of slavery in the Americas is a history of civil war. It's a history of civil war in all of those societies and colonies where slavery was practiced. There was no generation of Africans, not one. There was no generation of Africans in the Americas that did not rise up in military revolt against slavery. They did it in Africa. They did it on the slave ships in the Middle Passage. And when they arrived in the New World, they fought to the very bitter end. Nowhere can it be shown that the majority of African people did not fight against the evil of slavery. We have all the evidence of this. The battles on the African coast, the battles in the African interior, the battles on the Middle Passage, and the battles that continue unapace across the American colonies. When you put that together, what you have is a history of revolution against slavery. That continued. That is the legacy. It does not mean that there were not a few groups, individuals here and there who joined in with the enslavers. Of course there were those who joined in with the enslavers. But you cannot allow the minority of those who joined with the slave owners, as they do today, to become the dominant narrative, the dominant history. So the history of the majority is set aside because the Europeans wrote the history of the minority. who said that we have partners among them. Yes, they had a few partners. But the tidal wave of Africa resistance cannot be denied. And that is what we have to put aside. And this is why when we meet in Africa to discuss the future of global Africa, we have to put this history in proper context, and we have to let this history rise. We have to rise above the propaganda and let the history, the genuine scientific history, come to the fore. That is the basis on which we can speak of a future, because we know that history provides us with that dignity of opposition. The masses of African people in Africa and in the diaspora, the dignity of opposing the evil of enslavement and colonization. So my brothers and sisters, this is where we are. This is the moment in history. This is the moment of healing and solidarity. This is the movement and the moment where we change the history of Africa globally and also the history of humanity. And why do we do this? We do this because it's the right thing to do. Africa has always played its part in healing the human family and giving standards for humanity to rise. We have always played that role. And this is why in the West, they continue to look to us to provide that moral vision for humanity. This is why they looked to Nelson Mandela. This is why they looked to Martin Luther King. This is why they look to our people to provide the highest level of moral and ethical leadership to humanity. And if that's the role that the world expects of us, we will play that role. We will continue to play that role. But to do that, we have to have the solidarity that is needed to empower our philosophers, our visionaries, and our leaders. So my message to you, fellow conferees, is to embrace this moment. Let us get together in Africa in 2022 to have this global summit of the African peoples, to speak of the reparatory justice of the past, to speak of development of our economies, to speak of trans-international global visions of business, of commerce, of culture. This is the moment. This is it. My resolution, therefore, that I place on your agenda is to vote unanimously in support of this reality that we all need for the future. Bless you and enjoy a productive conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope we paid attention to that. Dr. Beckle's engagement with us is more of speaking to Africans in an African conference. You could see his pain regarding the loss of expectation from Africans in diaspora, especially when it comes to relying on some of our political leadership. And he was talking specifically of 20 years ago at the Durban conference. Now, the point I try to extract from this is that, for instance, this is an African initiative. That's why they say it's the 7th African Biosecurity Conference. GETS was birthed in Africa. GETS is full of African specialists. Some of the things that GETS seeks to protect has to do with the integrity of data that emanates from Africa. Some of the things that GETS seeks to protect, and this conference seeks to protect, is that things don't happen about Africa and about Africans, that Africans neither have a say in nor have control over. For us to feel the full impact of any African initiative, there must be a collaboration between Africans on the continent and Africans in diaspora. He's also said that Africans in diaspora appear to be more passionate Well, he also gave credit to African CSOs and professionals, but when it comes to our governments, he says they are rather slow. And this also speaks to some of the other presentations that were made and the exhaustive discussions we had on what African governments should do. I think we have a responsibility here to sensitize our governments, to work with public sector for them to understand the sort of thing we are going through and the sort of things we should be achieving. We also have a responsibility to take seriously what our diaspora says. Diaspora funds coming into Africa run into billions, and it's growing. If we neglect this group, apart from the fact that Africa remains divided, we'll also be doing ourselves a disservice, and also we'll be shortchanging ourselves. What Professor Beckles is asking for is a serious fence mending and internal cohesion within Africa. Our challenges are different. The predictions about Africa in terms of how COVID-19 will affect us, for me, why it was all off the mark is that they didn't know that 7 years ago, a group of Africans had sat down to start discussing biosecurity, to start looking at pandemics and the potential pandemics. And that group is GET. And I want to tell you that, well, whatever you do in preparedness, building awareness itself is a major intervention. It is preemptive, and it puts people in a situation where they can prepare. Yes, the infrastructure may not be there. Yes, the funding may not be there. But when the awareness is there, and the positioning is there, and the thinking, the right thinking that goes behind this is there, I think we're somewhere. So, it is a call for all of us to step up our game. Moji, what are your thoughts?
You have pretty much summarized everything Professor was discussing. It was just a charge for us all to play our part in delivering the Africa of our dreams, in delivering the 21st century Africa that we all desire to see. It's not enough for us to talk, but we must walk the talk of everything that we have been speaking about.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, what has a beginning will surely have an end. But it's also the beginning of a journey. Because when one phase stops, another phase goes. The 7th annual conference is about wrapping up. We just have 1 or 2 items left. But myself and Muji have thoroughly enjoyed your company. We have thoroughly enjoyed playing host to you. We want to thank GET for giving us the great opportunity to serve as hosts. What do you want to say anything? You know, I know you don't want to leave, but we don't want to leave. But
honestly, it has been an interesting 3 days, especially because for me, it's my first time at the GET conference, listening to thought-provoking conversations, intellectually stimulating conversations. And it's almost an emotional moment for me because the conference is gradually wrapping up, because it almost feels like we have to resume here every day to see beautiful faces and listen to very interesting conversations, but we have to go.
We do have to go. I wish I could stay on, but I think let's go back and think of what next steps will take. I don't know whether the Honorable Commissioner has anything to say before we go into the abstracts and look at the abstracts, and then the communique which will be said by Professor Bayori. But before I call Professor Bayori to conduct the abstracting, I want to ask HC, any parting shots, any parting, I can bring the mic there if you don't want to come up. I know you're tired. Or when do you want to, sir? Do you want me to step forward? Okay, you're pointing to Bobadoe. Okay, let's just have
Maybe we'll have the abstract for the communique,
Yeah,
and then if the
okay.
HC has something to say.
So, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of myself and my colleague on behalf of yourself and me, right?
My name is Mojibade Shisoye. I've had an amazing time being the co-host at the 7th annual One Health and Biosecurity Conference.
And my name is Shino Fagleru Byron. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll now officially.
God bless you. Thank you, Dr. Bobade.
Yeah, please a round of applause for our host and co-host. It will be wonderful in the last 3 days. Please a round of applause for them. A round of applause. Yeah. Thank you. Like the host said, whatsoever has a beginning must surely have an end. And we are getting close to the end of this program. Let me call on Professor Bayori to read the communique and the declaration. Then after that, we'll bring up the Honorable Commissioner for Health to declare the conference this year, the 7th annual conference on One Health and Biosecurity closed. And we announce the venue of the next year's conference. Please.
Thank you, Dr. Dotto. Thank you. Now, I've been asked to do a very simple thing, something I consider easier than what I've been doing for the past 3 days. We have here the communique of the conference, and I'm going to be taking it one by one, the title, the preamble, then the observations, item by item, and then the recommendations, so that if we agree, we will then, give assent, and if there are things we think we should tinker with, we will say so. So the title reads, I guess this is going to be projected. Ife, you are projecting, so that people will see it. Are we ready? Yes, so let me go ahead while she tries to do that. So the title is Communique of 7th African Conference on One Health and Biosecurity, themed Universal Approach to Addressing Biosecurity Threats, Genomic Intelligence, and the Vaccine, held on Wednesday 27 to Friday 29 October at the Civic Center, Victoria Land, Lagos, Nigeria. I guess that is correct. Now I'll proceed to take the preamble, which is very important. I'll just read through, it's just one paragraph. Preamble. The 7th African Conference on One Health and Biosecurity, themed Universal Approach to Addressing Biosecurity Threats, Genomic Intelligence, and Vaccines, held on Tuesday 27th, to Friday 29th October 2021. The 7th edition of the annual conference was organized by Global Emerging Pathogens Treatment Consortium, GET Africa, with the support of Lagos State Government and in partnership with key non-state institutions across the world, with focus on emerging diseases and concerns around biosecurity and biosafety in the African continent. The 3-day conference provided unique forum for robust interactions on biosecurity threats and the imperative of genomic intelligence and efficient healthcare responses in Africa. The conference, attended by professionals and stakeholders across the sectors of the society, received presentations from resource persons cutting across healthcare sector, agriculture, the environment, as well as from the development sector and civil society. The following observations and recommendations emerge following exhaustive deliberations. I think that goes down well with us, because what is happening here is that we are taking ownership of this. Anything we agree to, it means we are taking responsibility. This is the outcome of what we have done. So I'll take the observations one by one, and we will then try to look at that. One, in the age of genomic intelligence, which offers huge prospect for efficient healthcare delivery, African countries should not be left behind, considering that the world is at the stage where technology should be fully deployed to respond to hazards of infections. Therefore, genomic sequencing should be seen as part of the elaborate strategies to achieve the One Health objectives. That is the first observation. I think we are in tandem with that. Two, improvement of infrastructure is key to achieving One Health policy, particularly as a way of integrating biosafety into efficient health delivery system. I guess that biosafety should not have an hyphen. Correct that. Three, proper understanding of microbe landscape and dynamics of infections is critical in responding to biosecurity and biosafety and in meeting the goal of One Health initiative. Four, investment in biosecurity and biobanking has become a compelling imperative for the health sector following the deployment of genomics in the wake of Ebola in 2014, and considering that genomic diagnosis has been deployed to unravel the pattern of mutation and infections of Lassa fever after over 5 decades. 5. Africa is on the verge of a major antimicrobial resistance crisis, even though the developments at the level of Africa CDC regarding development of Africa Union AMR framework, draft policy for legal framework for antimicrobial control in Africa, and AMR guidance points in the direction of great potential to reverse the trend. 6. Threat of bioterrorism is a reality with their consequences for society and overriding challenge for governments and security agencies. I think we are cool with that. 7. Illicit trafficking has the potential of aggravating biosecurity threats in the maritime sector, with their consequence for countries, since nations across the world have become increasingly susceptible to biosecurity threats as a consequence of cross-border movements. 8. In spite of remarkable progress made at the regional level under the auspices of Africa CDC in development of biosecurity policy as instrument for effective biosecurity in Africa, low research opportunities and capacity building pose huge challenge. 9. Effective biosecurity, that should be, this is 7 years, that is 9. Effective biosecurity in Africa requires establishment of framework for effective practice of biotechnology and biosafety with the technological requirements, technical skills, as well as seamless networking among laboratories in Africa. 10. Civil society organizations play a crucial role in advancing biosecurity consciousness, pandemic management, and genomic intelligence through advocacy and direct involvement of stakeholders. I guess something to be there. Should be there. Of stakeholders responses to emergencies such as the COVID-19 pandemic. 11, the COVID-19 pandemic has helped in highlighting the important role of accessibility to data in driving decision-making in pandemic preparedness and response, particularly with regard to addressing issues within target groups in communities. Within target groups in communities. 12. That one, we've corrected that one. No need for the highlights in green. So just let's disregard it. And 12. Lagos State was able to contain the COVID-19 outbreak by leveraging on the experience of Ebola outbreak of 2014, which spurred the creation of the Lagos Biosecurity Council, policy, infrastructures, training, and collaboration were key to the success. The Lagos Biobank, which encompasses Biobank, BSL2, and BSL3, provides a model for participation of private sector in testing that can be adopted nationally and across sub-Saharan Africa. 13, there are generally poor record of political will on the part of African leaders to transit from mere adoption and assent to domestication and implementation of international conventions, protocols, and policies. 14, climate change adaptation and mitigation are major issues to consider in biosecurity and biosecurity. I guess it's like we agree with that, so that I can just go to the conference declaration before moving on to the recommendations. Conference declaration. The conference agreed to deploy consciousness engagement in demanding improved funding of research and development in the health sector in Africa, with the view to prioritize capacity building and exchange of ideas on best practices among professionals, researchers, and stakeholders towards addressing the emerging realities around biosecurity and One Health initiative. The conference reaffirmed commitment to genomics and precision medicine to address challenges of emerging diseases, as well as in pursuit of clear roadmap with strategic framework for vaccine accessibility, production, and distribution. Conference reiterated the importance of addressing antimicrobial resistance in health pipelines in the African continent. Realizing the need to sustain awareness on the international non-proliferation norms and biosecurity-related obligations, the conference resolved to demand improved commitment from governments of countries across Africa to existing obligations under the Biological Weapons Convention, BWC, and Resolution 1540 of the United Nations. I think that one very important, and I feel we all agree with that. The conference resolved to work with relevant states and non-stakeholders to address legal, ethical, and social issues to leverage on the opportunities of genomic intelligence and biosecurity. Now I go on to the recommendations. As a follow-up to the conference declaration, the following recommendations are proposed. 1, Africa should be the leaders in biosecurity development. Therefore, policymakers and government should support scientists and health professionals to strengthen biosecurity, medical and epidemiological services. to strengthen biosecurity. Medical and epidemiological services must be strengthened to guarantee biosecurity. 2, consistent efforts towards building capacities to respond to emergencies and flattening the waves of infections should be at the core of the proactive strategies against adverse effects of emerging diseases. 3, again, that highlight is not really necessary. We've deleted that. 3, African countries should strengthen their health system with establishment of biobanks and biosecurity councils for effective deployment of responses against emerging infections. 4, I guess we agree. 4, local vaccine manufacturers should be at the center of making vaccines available to Africans. Thus, African governments individually and collectively should provide enabling environment in response to the attendant challenges of emerging infectious diseases. Assistance from international partners should be centered more around capacity building, research and development, as well as experience sharing. 5, at the governmental level, antimicrobial resistance control guidance should be integrated into healthcare delivery systems, while non-governmental stakeholders, including youth, faith-based organizations, CSOs, need to ramp up their involvement within socio-cultural peculiarities of communities to conscientize towards behavioral changes. 6, there should be deliberate, consistent, and policy-driven intervention of armed forces, security agencies, and immigration departments in averting and containing access of unauthorized persons and non-state actors to biological agents. There is need for the development of framework for the establishment of Africa Center for Genomics, Data Management, and Bioinformatics as custodian of repository for accessibility to molecular bioresource data in Africa. 8, African leaders should take practical steps towards reversing long-lasting dependency on foreign donors in addressing health challenges by focusing on education, research, and development, giving due recognition to indigenous innovation and harnessing the capacity of citizens within the region and in the diaspora as a major step towards One Health initiative and wholesome prosperity. And lastly, that is number 14. African countries should work closely with international partners to ensure adherence to common standards and compliance with binding conventions, protocols, and international agreements. Thank you. So I take it that we have asked them again.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Bayori. We are supposed to debate or contribute to this, but if we start that now, I'm sure we will not finish by till 10 p.m. So what we're going to do is that we are going to share this declaration with everybody that registered for the conference by the end of today, so that you can put your observations, correction, whatever you notice directly on the soft copy and send it back to GET. We are going to annex everything, and by next week, Monday, Tuesday, we are going to share the final document with everybody. You agree with me that we can't have a conference of this quality and not have a clear output from the conference. The output, which is the declaration, will be shared with international organizations, development partners, government organizations, and we're going to develop a policy brief from it, which we're going to share with both international, national, and regional organizations in Africa. So that is what we'll do with the declaration. Thank you, Professor Bayori. A round of applause for him again. Yeah, so we're getting closer to the end of this program. And there's something we have to do before we end this program. In fact, if we don't do it, it will not be the best. You agree with me that regardless of the quality of knowledge or experience or plan you have, if there's no money to execute your plan, then the plan will become frustration. And there are self-organizations that have supported GET financially to make sure that we have a very comfortable place and we can bring these excellent speakers and excellent participants from different parts of the world to make sure that we have this very important conference again this year. And we just have to celebrate these organizations and these people that have worked tirelessly with GET and have supported us in cash and kind to make sure that this conference is very, very successful. You agree with me that the conference is successful? If you agree with me, say yeah. Thank you. So, can someone project, okay, the sponsors of this conference, as I mentioned their name one by one, please give them a round of applause. Carter Biggs, 54G, Biology. A round of applause, please. Cleaner Lancet, Ikaba Biotech, Mercury Medical Services, Peter and Jane, Same Lab, Bank of Industry, Life Center Medicals, and our very, very good friend from UNODA. We have two of our sponsors that would like to say thank you or say something for just 1 minute. I think Mr. Ohenetega Imunoya. If you are here, please come up for 1 minute. And Dr. Okwe Oladujoye. Is Dr. Okwe here? Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. All protocols duly observed. My name is Tega Imirai, molecular scientist for Biologic Support Services, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be here standing before you this evening. I just want to say a few things about who we are and what we are at Biologic Support Services. We're a life science company in biotech poised towards three major things: training, capacity development, and solving problems in Nigeria's growing bioeconomy. And we as a company think Nigeria's biotech company is a growing space. Where we used to be before COVID and where we are now is quite a gap. Thank God for that. That's one of the advantages of the COVID pandemic. And we hope we could do better. And at Biologics, we are primed towards making sure that necessary skill, molecular training, genomics training, bioinformatics training, which is the science of the future, is well served to students, researchers, undergraduates, and every scientist as far as the Nigerian biotech space is concerned. We are thankful for the opportunity to be able to display some of our products and services at this conference this year, and we hope by the time we have this conference next year, we would have been able to achieve a good majority of our milestones and goals and contributed significantly to our ever-evolving biotech space and industry. Thank you very much for your attention.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Kwemiola Nijoye, and I am very happy and proud to have been part of this successful event hosted by the GET organization. And, well, it's been very interesting for me learning the journey of how the business we're into now started. We're a member of the Lagos State Consortium, and I know that everybody in this room at some point or the other would have been asked how COVID-19 impacted their lives. But more specifically, I would like to know how COVID-19 changed your healthcare needs. From always having to remember to stock up on face masks and hand sanitizers, to ensuring that you remember to do your COVID tests when you're traveling, to also ensuring that you do not relegate your non-COVID healthcare needs, because communicable and non-communicable diseases still exist in our society, to ensuring that emergency healthcare response is always top of our minds, and then to keeping yourself up to date on clinical features of COVID-19, so that when we have those features, we can easily access care at formidable healthcare organizations or centers around us. Well, as a member of Life Center Medical Services, we have been able to enter into the healthcare space and ensure that we solve the healthcare worries of so many Lagosians and Nigerians at large. So from building a formidable supply chain within a few years to ensuring that we provide, through our molecular laboratory and clinical laboratory, we provide COVID-19 tests. We are one of the accredited NCDC labs and Lagos State labs in Nigeria, and we are also one of the few labs that are allowed to carry out tests for people who are traveling to China. And that speaks to the quality of our tests. Number one on our minds whenever we run our services is that our clients have to be happy, their needs have to be fulfilled, quality has to be maintained, and also results have to be delivered on time. Moving from there, we also have our logistics arm, the ambulance company, which ensures that emergency medical response, whether COVID or not, are still prioritized in Nigeria. We also ensure that non-COVID tests are still well catered for through our other diagnostic services. And then, in partnership with Lagos State government, we have successfully operated a private-public partnership at the Bagada Cardiorenal Center. All of this we have achieved in a short time because of the kind of quality standards that we hold ourselves to. So as I speak now, some of our members are around, will be sharing cards. We wish everyone that is at this event a safe trip back to your locations, and we hope that while you're here and while you're traveling back to wherever you belong to, you're going to call us for your tests and be sure that you have nothing to worry about when COVID-19 and healthcare is concerned, because we have you covered. Thank you very much.
Just now we're getting closer to the end of the conference. I wish we can continue tomorrow. Yeah, before I bring out the Honorable Commissioner for Health. Oh, sorry. Okay, please, we have one other sponsor, very important sponsor that wants to speak with us for 2 minutes. And I'm seeing Mr. Abraham, I'm seeing a woman standing up. But she's from SynLab Laboratory. Please, she's one of our very important sponsors. She's going to speak just for 2 minutes. Please give her a round of applause.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to showcase some of the things we do at SynLab. This really has been a very good exposure to what is happening in Africa in terms of health and everything. SynLab is SynLab belongs to the global group SynLab Global. We are in 4 continents and over 36 countries. What we offer quality diagnostic services to doctors for them to be able to make informed decisions concerning the health of their patient. Yes, we are also one of the laboratories that are into a partnership with Lagos Biobank and NCDC. Of course, because of the global brand and because of the quality of service we've been able to provide over the years in Nigeria and in other parts of the world, our results are acceptable in every part of the world, not just in Nigeria alone. We have the PCR testing for COVID-19, and we have the rapid testing for people that just want to show they want to know their level of exposure to the virus, of course. And in terms of other pathological tests that we do, we have because of the quality results that we give to our doctors, they trust us because they've been able to trust us all over the years and even in the nearest future. We want to assure you that we are still in business of providing good services to each and every member of the country, each and every citizen, and also we know what it means to give quality results, and that is why we always preach quality results, and we will stop at nothing to always provide that kind of service to everyone. Then, finally, we want every one of us to know that COVID-19, of course, is here to stay. All we need to do is we need to take all the precautionary measures that have been profiled by the Ministry of Health, both in Lagos State and Nigeria, for us to always put on our nose mask, and anytime we're in large gatherings like this, wash our hands. Even if we do not have water and soap, we can always use hand sanitizer, because by the time we are following these procedures and all that, we'll be able to limit the spread of these diseases. And we want everyone to be rest assured that we will surely come out of it strong, and by the grace of the Almighty God, each and every one of us will get to our final destination. And even as we go back, let us have it at the back of our minds that Nigeria will surely be great again. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. Yes, very quickly before we go, I want to say thank you to some organizations and individuals that deserve it. And I'm starting from the Ministry of Health that have been supporting Global Emerging Pathogens Treatment Consortium GET right from the first day. Right from the days of Dr. Jide Idris to the days of now with Professor Biosecurity. I want to say thank you for all the support Ministry of Health gave GET in organizing this conference, both in cash and kind. The Honorable Commissioner, Professor Biosecurity, the Permanent Secretary, Dr. Okulaja, the PA to the Commissioner, Stephanie, Titia Kosa, Dr. Kafayat, and so many other staffs of the Ministry of Health that work with GET to make sure that we have this very, very fantastic conference. Please, audience, let's put our hands together for the staff of the Ministry of Health, Lagos State Ministry of Health. And finally, there's a verse in the Bible that says, "Blessed are you amongst women." I have some very great sets of women that have been working with me at the Global Emerging Pathogens Treatment Consortium GET. I think I'm the only male in the team, and that is not gender balanced. And these set of ladies have been working with me tirelessly in the last 1 year. Sometimes we fight, we do a lot of arguments, but they've come a long way to take GET from where we were last year. But if you were at last year's conference, can you raise your hand? Can you see a whole lot of difference from what we did last year and what we are doing this year? It's not magic. It's because some people had sleepless nights to make sure that this place is comfortable, to make sure that we bring the best guests and presenters from all over the world, to make sure that every single activity is well done and is done professionally. Can I call every single staff of Guest Secretariat to please come up to the stage? And as they come, please give them a round of applause. Can you see that I've been blessed man on this? It's not a fashion parade. These ones are beauty and brain. Can you just see them? So, these are the great minds, the beautiful minds that have been supporting me at the Secretariat of Global Emerging Pathogens Treatment Consortium. We may be small, but we are mighty. It's not about the number of people you work with, it's about the quality of people that you work with. And I want to say thank you to you. You've worked tirelessly in the last few weeks, in the last few months, to make sure that this conference is a success. Thank you very much. Give them a round of applause for me. Finally, let me call on the Honorable Commissioner for Health, Professor Akinabayomi, the great visionary, the person that the vision or the person behind the vision called GET, and the person that has taken the vision he has for GET and the passion he has for GET to Lagos State. Within a very short period of time, the way GET has transformed, Lagos State is also transforming. And by God's grace, the vision will go to Nigeria, the vision will go to Africa, and the vision will go to the ends of the world. Can you join me with a standing ovation to welcome the Honorable Commissioner for Health, Lagos State, Professor Akinabayomi, to the stage.
Thank you very much for those very kind words. And thank you very much to the GET team for all the diligent work, the hard work that you've done to put this magnificent conference together. Another feather in the cap of GET, the 7th African Conference on One Health and Biosecurity. We've been able to have these meetings consistently every year. Even during COVID, we managed to have the 6th African Conference last year. And this year we're having the 7th, and we will continue to have a conference every year somewhere on the continent of Africa. And indeed, one year we may go to a befitting location in the African diaspora. And judging by the last speaker, a very nice place in my imagination would be the Caribbean. But we look forward to that in the future. I must say that the caliber of presentations this year has been outstanding. We always have good presentations because biosecurity is a very diverse and interesting subject. But I have to congratulate the GET Consortium this year because for the first time, we were able to pull as many representatives of the stakeholders that are required to have a successful biosecurity conference. And from the appearance of people coming on a daily basis for the past 3 days, you can see that we've had every major stakeholder attending this conference. And we're very impressed with the fact that the security agencies who are here, some of them have come in the very smart uniforms, and some of them are here in their plain uniforms or plain clothes. But certainly every day we've had members of the security agencies in Nigeria and across the continent. We had hoped that COVID would be over by now, but it hasn't been the case, and therefore we've had to conduct this conference once again, as we did last year, in a hybrid fashion. But we hope that next year, after we've been able to bring COVID under control where it should be, that we will have a very large conference to look back at the past 2 or 3 years and see how Africa has actually performed in this global biological shock. I think it's very nice for people to see how GET has evolved over the past 7 years. When GET started, the predictions were about this massive global phenomenon that was going to cause mayhem across the world. And of course, nobody wants bad news. Nobody wants to imagine that the world was going to be brought to its knees. And only the other day I heard someone say, well, if you don't believe in God, you should believe in God now, when a particle that you can't even see with your eyes has been able to bring every country on this planet to its knees. And that just shows you how powerful the biological component of the ecosystem is. It shows you that we really have to respect biology and the ecosystem. It teaches us that if we don't respect what God has made, and if we don't respect Mother Nature, when Mother Nature wants to teach you a lesson, as human beings, we have no defense. And so I think if we take that message home, and that we remember that biosecurity essentially means, as human beings, and when God created the earth, he said to Adam, and if you believe in Christianity or in Islam or any other spiritual religion, there's always something about creation. And at the end of creation, God said, it is good. And he said, take care of my creation. I don't think he gave that instruction for fun. And if you mistreat God's creation, then something happens, and there are consequences. So, I think it's important that when we talk about biosecurity, we actually understand what it means. And biosecurity simply means, in very simple English, that we ensure the security of the biosphere that we so totally depend on for our survival. So biosecurity, the security of the biosphere. We breathe in air, we drink water, we eat food, and everything that was created in the ecosystem was created for a reason. And you heard Dr. Fashaway talking about the One Health and her perspective of it. And she said she wondered why certain things were created, why God created flies or insects or mosquitoes, and everything plays a role. It's not for us to fully understand what that role is, but when you remove that entity when you cause that entity to become extinct, then you create a broken link in the chain of command of the ecosystem. Now, traditionally, we have always produced a declaration at the end of each conference. And that is for two reasons. One is to demonstrate that this hasn't been a conference or a talk shop. That's one. So we've got rapporteurs that have collected every aspect of every presentation that was made during the conference and crystallized it into this document that you see. And thank you very much to the rapporteurs for doing such a great job. Thank you, Professor Ayoba. But you ignore this declaration at your peril. What GET has done, and I can only speak for GET, and I can speak for Lagos, and I can speak for Nigeria, and I can speak for the West African Health Authority that are represented here, by my very good friend, Dr. So, is that we have never neglected the declaration of the GET consortium. Because after each conference, we have produced very profound recommendations and declarations that if you follow them, and if you use them as points and focus of advocacy, that the outcomes will be absolutely mind-boggling to yourself. Lagos followed the declarations since the Dakar meeting. So we've had the Dakar declaration, we've had the first Lagos declaration, we've had the Accra declaration, the Freetown declaration, and so on. And each of them were a combination of great minds that came together at these conferences to focus on what was required to ensure that Africa protects and secures its biosphere and all the ramifications of what that means. And so the thematic area this year was so pertinent. It was talking about the genomics of what is required to get genomic intelligence around pandemics, and particularly in this case, COVID. And then we examined vaccines and how to enhance our capacity on the continent to produce vaccines and how to use those vaccines in a situation like this. The creation of the vaccines that we're using at the moment is unprecedented in the history of mankind. To be able to produce at least 10 vaccines in the period of 18 months that have demonstrated efficacy and have been relatively devoid of significant adverse events is a testament of the advancement of biotechnology. And it can be viewed in two ways. It can be viewed that henceforth, human beings will always and have the capacity to address any major shock that we may experience as human beings on this planet. But it also demonstrates, and we have an expression in biosecurity, and it's called dual use. D-U-A-L, dual use. It means that anything can be used for good, but can also be used for bad. A good example of that is nuclear technology. Nuclear technology can be used to save the world in terms of the need for more energy, more cost-effective and sustainable energy. But nuclear physics can also be used to make a nuclear bomb that could destroy the planet. So everything that we can invent can be used in two ways. We can use it to be absolutely beneficial to humankind, or we can use it to be absolutely detrimental and destructive to humanity. And so there comes in the issue of moral ethics. And biosecurity is full of issues of moral ethics. We have in the GET consortium a whole directorate that deals with the issues of social justice, moral ethics, and the appropriate use of biotechnology. We've learned in this conference that human beings now almost have acquired the ability to act almost like creators. In other words, we can create new living organisms. We can tinker around with existing pathogens and make them absolutely extraordinarily lethal. And we do it. There is, in several biosafety laboratories around the world, scientists that are making pathogens extremely potent, virulent, and lethal. They do that from a science perspective. They do it because they know, for example, that COVID has the opportunity to mutate into a more dangerous form of COVID. And so they artificially make a more dangerous form of COVID and then use research to find the treatment or the vaccine that would be successful, just in case COVID does that on its own in nature. So that's what we're doing as human beings. And that really shows you how important biosecurity is and the ethics of biosecurity. Because if you don't do that kind of experiment in a very safe place with attention to responsibility as a scientist to your to humanity, you might actually be doing more good, more harm than good. But the point is that with the advancement of biotechnology, we have the ability to cut and paste genetic material, experiment, and look for new forms of life. New forms of life that are supposed to essentially improve our economy, improve our health, and improve our ability to survive in what appears to be an ever-increasing toxic environment. We may get to a point, if we are not careful with the way we manage our environment, we may get to a point where we might have to actually engineer human beings to survive in a very hazardous and toxic environment. So these are the directions, the potential directions that we as humanity can go in. Hopefully, we will come to our senses. The COP26 meeting is happening in a few days in Scotland. Many of us in this room should be there. It is probably going to be the most significant grouping of people to discuss the future of this planet. It is at that meeting that if we do not make declarations in this form that absolutely compel governments to cut down on emission and reverse global warming. There are some proponents of climate change that think that we have already gone past the threshold and that there is nothing we can do to stop the process of continuous disruption of our weather systems as a result of unparalleled toxicity of our environment. We hope that that's not the case, but more importantly, we hope compatible with normal life. So the things that we've been talking about in this room for the past 3 days are so serious. And these recommendations are absolutely profound. And it is up to us to take these recommendations, to make your suggestions over the next few days. This is a democratic process. Your input into these declarations is very, very important. When you get this in your email, please read it. Make your comments and send it back to us. And we will take these and make a communique out of it and deliver a message that will be sent to every government on this continent, every government in the states of Nigeria, every regional power and authority, and of course it will go far and beyond the continent of Africa, because there is no other continent that is holding these kinds of meetings that so comprehensively address issues of major concern to us. On that note, I'd like to thank you. It has been a full house for 3 days. I'd like to thank you for coming back, for contributing to the deliberations. We've had absolutely fantastic presentations. I've been listening to as many as I can. The recordings are going to be available. Each of the papers delivered here will be available to everybody. We are going to compile these papers into proceedings of this conference so that you can go back and read each of the presentations. And of course, there will be a special communique that addresses the very, very pertinent recommendations and declarations of this year's 7th conference. The GET Consortium, in collaboration with the Lagos State Ministry of Health, they've been a twin organization since their conception. We would like other states and other governments to join hands with us to take this conference across the continent. There's always competition for where the next venue will be. If you want to take it out of Lagos, you really have to convince GET that it's worth their while to leave Lagos, because Lagos always wants this conference to be in Lagos. But we understand that the conference needs to migrate to every sub-region on the continent, and we've tried that, and it works. However, we're not going to give it to you, you have to take it. And if you want to take it, you have to convince us that you can hold a conference of this caliber and arrange a conference of this magnitude and come up with the conclusions that we're so accustomed to. I'd like to thank especially Mr. Governor, the incident commander of the Lagos State response. I think you could have, those of you that were here on the first day can see that the passion that he portrays in terms of his understanding of the principles of biosecurity. We call him now an expert in biosecurity. He doesn't need coaching anymore. He understands profoundly what biosecurity is all about. He can hold his own anywhere in the world. They often ask him questions at the beginning. He would always defer to me, but now he no longer asks for my opinion. He just gives it straight back at you, and that is testament to his in-depth understanding of the field of biosecurity. So thank you. A round of applause to Mr. Governor. He's been very gracious in supporting this meeting with a lot of resources, and his presence here demonstrates his commitment to the future of a biosecure Lagos, and of course, by extension, Nigeria. I'd like to thank all members of the Ministry of Health that were involved in putting this conference together, and then to the GET Consortium. You're growing every year in leaps and bounds. Credit to you for all the hard work. You are taking the message of biosecurity to school children, to communities. You've started a GET journal. You're about to launch an Institute of Biosecurity Studies somewhere in Nigeria. You're producing a newsletter every quarter. You're really doing the work of advocacy to everybody. As you heard Professor Denloye say, biosecurity is everybody's business. And therefore, we must teach our children what it means and what it means to ensure that our biosphere is secure. Thank you very much to all our international visitors that came here from far and wide. It's not easy to travel nowadays in the COVID era. I really thank you for coming. There are some very, very important people that came from Senegal, from South Africa, from Mali, from Addis Ababa, from Kenya, from everywhere. If not for COVID, I'm sure we would have had to rent a much larger hall just to accommodate all the visitors that we normally have at these GET conferences. Hopefully, next year, COVID will not be in our way, and we'll have to rent a very large hall to be able to accommodate all the experts that support the discipline of biosecurity. And so, two things that need to be decided for next year is next year's theme and next year's location. We will spend the next month deciding what the theme will be. We will spend the next month deciding if anybody is going to grab the location from Lagos. I wish you luck in trying to take the venue away from Lagos, but if you are able to put forward a convincing narrative, we will gladly yield to another location. On that note, I wish to thank you from the bottom of my heart for gracing this occasion and for all the magnificent contributions you've made. I now declare this meeting closed.